Welcome. My name is Mary Davis Fournier, and I am Deputy Director of the American Library Association's Public Programs Office. I'm also project directing the exciting new initiative this webinar is related to, Building Common Ground, Discussions of Community, Civility, and Compassion. I'd like to thank you all for joining us in today's online learning session. It's great to see so many people from all over the country in this. This session will present an overview of the Charter for Compassion, resources and activities associated with this initiative, and it will dig a little deeper into familiarizing you as programming librarians with the 12 Steps to a Compassionate Life Reading Group Initiative and Model for Action. This session is presented by programminglibrarian.org, a resource website of the American Library Association Public Programs Office, developed with support from the Institute of Museum and Library Services and the ALA Cultural Communities Fund. Okay, I see that some folks were having difficulty hearing me. Can everyone hear me right now? I've got a bunch of yeses. Fantastic. Okay, I'll just keep going. Today's session is open to anyone interested in using the Charter for Compassion as a program framework for your community programs, and especially in using Karen Armstrong's book, 12 Steps to a Compassionate Life, with reading and book discussion groups. We are providing this webinar in the hopes that each of you will consider applying for the Building Common Ground Small Grant for Public Libraries. Information about this funding can be found currently at ala.org/common ground, the ALA landing page. It will take you to the project page. To summarize, though, under this initiative, 30 libraries will each be awarded a $2,500 programming grant. Libraries are required to submit their program plans for a multi-format series in line with the guidelines available on the project website. And libraries are required to recruit at least one community partner for the initiative. The application deadline is coming up. It is November 18th, 2011 to file your online application. And we really encourage people to try to file those applications even a little before November 18th, because it is an online application and we know the foibles of websites. The goal of this project is to engage the public in contemplation and discussion of the importance of community, civility, and compassion in their daily lives. It is our hope that after identifying issues of concern to your community, libraries will utilize the project program resources and your own ideas to create opportunities for meaningful reflection, engagement, and action between community members. This session will dig deeper into a number of exciting resources that have served in part as inspiration for the Building Common Ground initiative. By the end of this session, you will have a clearer understanding of the array of resources associated with the Charter for Compassion and how to use these resources to address significant issues in your community. We are extremely grateful to the Fetzer Institute for their support of the Building Common Ground initiative. We're also delighted to have all of you with us today and hope that you will think about using this program model as a component to a Building Common Ground grant proposal. Before we get started, I'd like to set out some basic information about communication in the online classroom. Then we'll move along to the main presentation. So, 3 things. 1, first, please do not use the instant message feature to pose technical questions. If you're experiencing any technical difficulties, you should send a private message to our tech expert, Angela Hanshaw. Click on the arrow on the top right of the chat box, select Chat With, and then select Angela Hanshaw under Attendees. She is our trusty expert in Adobe Connect and will help you out. 2, we have a question and answer period built into this presentation after the main presentation. In order to keep the program on track, we ask that you type any questions you may have during the presentation into the Q&A box on the right. At the end of the presentation, I or one of the presenters will ask all of the questions, answer all of the questions asked, and repeat them for the group so that they are addressed in an efficient manner. There's also going to be time at the end to post any new questions you have in that area as well. And finally, if you experience technical difficulties during the session, don't panic. The complete presentation is being recorded and will be available for download at the program's conclusion. So today we will be hearing from 3 presenters. I want to take a moment and introduce them all now. Our first presenter will be Pamela Kilborn-Miller, Project Manager for the Charter for Compassion. Prior to her work with the Charter for Compassion, Pam worked in various capacities for Microsoft, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Dalai Lama Center for Peace and Education, and other organizations. She creates networks of self-organizing groups who share common goals for accelerating positive change. This work is informed by her graduate research at the University of Washington that focused on how the knowledge networks at the United Nations collaborate to meet Millennium Development Goals. Pam will be talking with us today about the Charter for Compassion, a concept and movement that grew from Karen Armstrong's 2008 TED Prize. She will share some of the context for the Charter and Charter-related activities around the world today, including recommendations for creating programming for building common ground programs utilizing and inspired by the Charter. Following Pam, we will hear from Roselle Kovitz. Roselle is a communication consultant and writer. She has been a pioneer in public broadcasting outreach and has managed a variety of national outreach campaigns. In addition to her most recent work for the Fetzer Institute, including coordinating 12 Steps to a Compassionate Life reading groups for the Charter for Compassion, Roselle now also worked on projects for Frontline, McNeil Lair Productions, and Reading Rainbow, among others. She co-authored A History of Public Broadcasting and started Shaken and Stirred by Cancer, a blog showcasing artistic expression from those touched by cancer. Roselle authored the Reading Group Organizer's Guide, which can be downloaded from the Programming Resources section of the Building Common Ground website, and I hope you have all had a chance to review it in advance of today's webinar. If not, you can immediately go there and download it as a PDF after this webinar. Roselle will be talking about us today about convening reading groups around a 12-step to a compassionate life and sharing some recommendations and best practices with us. Finally, we will hear from Reverend Guo Xin. Xin is an ordained Buddhist nun who is active in interfaith dialogue, co-founder of Women of Spirit and Faith, and an ambassador for the Council of the Parliament of the World's Religions. She is also the facilitator of the Compassionate Action Network Seattle Reading Group on the 12 Steps to a Compassionate Life. She will share some of her hands-on experiences and recommendations as a reading group facilitator and participant with us today. So we have a wealth of expertise and wisdom with us today, and we are so lucky to have them here with us to explore these program resources, to share their inspiration, their tips, and their best practices, and to share with us this forum for asking questions and hearing from each other what our plans are, what the barriers we see to creating these types of programs are, and to finding some solutions. So without further ado, I'd like to turn the mic over to Pam Kilborn-Miller, Project Manager for the Charter for Compassion.
Thanks very much, Mary. We'd really like to thank Mary, the ALA, the Fetzer Institute, and everybody on this online education opportunity. We incredibly admire librarians for many reasons, and especially in this context because we consider you to be important global change agents. So the first obvious question, of course, is what is the Charter for Compassion? And we'd like to begin by showing you a quick video of people reciting the Charter that won the TED Prize for British author Karen Armstrong in 2008. So you can start that video now, please.
The principle of compassion lies at the heart of all religious, ethical, and spiritual traditions,
calling us always to treat all others as we wish to be treated ourselves.
Compassion impels us to work tirelessly to alleviate the suffering of our fellow creatures.
To dethrone ourselves from the center of our world and put another there.
To honor the inviolable sanctity of every single human being.
Treating everybody without exception.
With absolute justice, equity, and respect.
It is also necessary in both public and private life.
To refrain consistently and empathically from inflicting pain.
To act or speak violently out of spite, chauvinism, or self-interest.
To impoverish, exploit, or deny basic rights to anybody.
And to incite hatred by denigrating others, even our enemies.
Is a denial of our common humanity.
We acknowledge that we have failed to live compassionately.
And that some have even increased the sum of human misery in the name of religion.
We therefore call upon all men and women
to restore compassion
to the center of morality and religion.
To return to the ancient principle
that any interpretation of Scripture
that breeds violence,
hatred,
or disdain
is illegitimate.
To ensure that youth are given accurate and respectful information
about other traditions, religions, and cultures.
To encourage a positive appreciation
of cultural and religious diversity.
To cultivate
an informed empathy
with the suffering of all human beings,
even those
regarded as enemies.
We urgently need to make compassion a clear, luminous, and dynamic force in our polarized world.
Rooted in a principled determination to transcend selfishness.
Compassion can break down political, dogmatic, ideological, and religious boundaries.
Born of our deep interdependence, compassion is essential for human relationships and to a fulfilled humanity.
It is the path to enlightenment and indispensable in the creation of a just economy and a peaceful global community.
That video was produced by TED for the launch of the Charter for Compassion in 2009, and I'll just take it slow for a moment to let what we heard settle in a bit. I'd like to make 2 points. One is that after that video and the Charter launched, the obvious question that Karen Armstrong heard is, well, how can we possibly fulfill the ideals of the Charter? And Karen wrote the book, 12 Steps to a Compassionate Life, as a direct action-oriented response to that question. So the book, 12 Steps, was designed to help fulfill the ideals in the Charter. One other point that's important to make is that the Charter grew out of Karen's wish to work with all major religions to write it, but Ted and Karen consider it, this project, the Charter for Compassion, a secular project that applies to all civic life. And so the next thing I think that would be helpful is to briefly define compassion and explain very briefly the history of the Charter. I have one more super short video. It's also just 2 minutes. This was produced by TED for the Charter's first birthday celebration at the United Nations last year. And an actor from a TV show called The Office narrated the video. It's Rainn Wilson. So we can go ahead and play the video. Thank you.
Okay, so a charter is a document, much like the Declaration of Independence or the Magna Carta, where you swear to uphold certain ideas or beliefs no matter what. The Charter for Compassion is a document written by people from around the world representing every country and every faith. People like Archbishop Desmond Tutu, Grand Mufti Sheikh Ali Gomaa, and Karen Armstrong. Thousands have affirmed the Charter, like Queen Rania, Sir Richard Branson, and even His Holiness, the Dalai Lama. Compassion is basically, well, it's the golden rule. It's an idea that has been around for centuries, and it's at the core of all the world's religious and ethical beliefs. The Charter for Compassion is a declaration to restore compassion to the center of our moral and religious traditions. Starting as a wish at the TED conference, it has inspired a movement. Over in San Francisco, there are students that are getting together to talk about what the Golden Rule means to them. Seattle took up the Charter, becoming the first official compassionate city.
Compassionate Seattle. It is up to us.
And in the U.S., the entire Presbyterian Church signed up, which is awesome. The Irish threw a Compassion Festival, and in South Africa, the Reverend Peter Story unveiled the charter at the World Cup. The Charter for Compassion has been endorsed by institutions as diverse as the Sydney Opera House, the Washington Cathedral, the Karachi Press Club, the Chautauqua Institution, and the Garden of Forgiveness in Lebanon. From Amsterdam to Pakistan, from Mexico to Dubai, Lahore to London, Toronto to Tel Aviv, I mean everywhere, millions of people around the world are coming together to make the Charter their own. And now, we're looking to you. You want your own school, community, city, or country to be more compassionate? Go to charterforcompassion.org to find out how. Why don't we all start right about now?
So in a nutshell, what is it that the Charter for Compassion is trying to accomplish? Basically, what we're trying to do is to awaken and activate the golden rule around the world. And once again, we consider this to be a secular project. So obviously, this is a daunting task. You know, how in the world are we going to do that? The first thing that we have is a partner network with 150 partners in 31 nations. That includes and ranges from Pakistan, the Middle East, Europe, Asia, South America, Africa, and North America. We have all sectors included in our partner network, including business, academia, government, nonprofits, and a range of different organizations. I'll give you just some quick examples of our partners. So one thing that was really helpful, because sometimes people think that compassion is a soft topic, and but what we're doing is working with academic researchers, institutions such as Stanford University Center for Compassion and Altruism Research and Education. We're also working as one of our partners with UC Berkeley's Greater Good Science Center, and they're providing really incredible fact-based insights. And one example is that we recently learned that Charles Darwin didn't coin the term survival of the fittest for his theory of evolution, that what he actually believed in was survival of the kindest. And that comes from the Greater Good Science Center at UC Berkeley. You're welcome to look into that if you'd like more information about that. So of course it's helpful to explain some of the activities. What are the actual activities that we're doing to support the Charter? And one of them, and I wanted to mention this first one, it's another reason why we love librarians, is that we built into this whole strategy for the Charter a 4-step change process from the United Nations. This 4-step change process is used by the United Nations to meet the Millennium Development Goals. And it's very simple. It's going to sound like common sense, but it becomes basically the wheel or the gear that moves us forward. So the first step is awareness and outreach. The second step is training and learning. The third step is implementation. And the fourth step is measurement and evaluation. Originally, we thought that the reading groups would fulfill the second step, which is training and learning, and that's the area that we're really interested in and excited about librarians too. But what we found is that actually all 4 of those steps, awareness and outreach, training and learning, implementation, and measurement and evaluation, happen within the reading group in Seattle that Roselle, Guo-Chin, and myself, who are presenting on this event, participate in. So that's really exciting. And what we found, and they'll go into more detail about reading groups, but I just want to say that we've experienced magic in the reading groups that we participated in. And so it's very exciting. So in terms of activities, our large campaigns are focused on a couple areas. We have a Compassionate Schools project, and some examples of that include that in Pakistan, 35 schools have signed up for a pilot project, and they hope to expand that across the country. They signed up very quickly, which is encouraging. In Amman, Jordan, they're creating kits for schools that teach compassion, and that includes for schools that are in the desert too, for nomadic schools. What they in Pakistan and Jordan hope to do is expand the Compassionate Schools network across the Middle East. So you can see why this is potentially just so exciting, and we're still at the beginning, and we're thrilled to have you involved with this with this campaign and this initiative. Another thing just very exciting that just came out that we announced today on Facebook is that the team in Pakistan, the Charter for Compassion team in Pakistan, is working with Sesame Street to create a new character that will model compassion for children in Pakistan. And as I said, we just announced that today. So Compassionate Schools, that's one of our big campaigns. The other big one that I'd like to mention is what's called the International Campaign for Compassionate Cities. And when the charter first launched, everybody was sitting around, wondering, okay, how can we fulfill this? What can we do to support it? And in Seattle and Vancouver, a team decided, well, we recommend focusing on mayors. That is M-A-Y-O-R-S, mayors of cities. And Seattle became the first city in the world to affirm the Charter for Compassion. That's why Roselle, myself, and Guo-Chin are involved with this right now, how that evolved. And we now have over 60 cities involved in the International Campaign for Compassionate Cities. And just a quick example, that includes Amman, Amsterdam, Barcelona, Cairo, Cape Town, Dublin, Melbourne, New Delhi, Tel Aviv, Washington, D.C., and Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. So an example of the Campaign for Compassionate Cities and how they get started, it can be very simple. In the town of Basalt, Colorado, 5th graders from a school went to a town council meeting and asked the mayor and the town council to become a compassionate city. And the mayor and town council asked them to write the proclamation, which later on was read in the town council, and I guess everybody choked up. It was so incredibly moving. So one example in Basalt, just to give you a little more flesh on these bones of the activities, is each city does something that's unique to its own city, because most cities have unique challenges. So in the example of Basalt in Colorado, they decided to welcome their incredibly diverse community of immigrants and wanted them to feel really welcome and a part of the community. So they've had events and welcomed them into the Compassionate Basalt campaign, and that's been very successful. And a small anecdote that's really kind of fun, I just wanted to mention, is that a judge in a courtroom in Basalt was frustrated with 2 arguing attorneys, and he just became exasperated and asked them if they knew that Basalt was now considered a compassionate city, and because of that they needed to behave in his courtroom. So that's an example. People are using this as a lever to change behavior. So moving on to the opportunities. So this is the last section that I'll speak to. And so some of the opportunities that Ted would like me to mention to this community of librarians in the ALA is that if that Charter for Compassion video, the text moved you in any way, we invite people to invite their families, friends, communities to just add their name, take 5 seconds to add their name to the Charter for Compassion that's on that charterforcompassion.org website address. Another possibility that we're doing, because we could end up with a million different activities, but Ted would like to filter the activities through the International Campaign for Compassionate Cities. So the website for that, one outcome of your events, if you're interested, no pressure, but if you're interested and wondering what might result from them, is to have cities join that Compassionate Cities campaign. And the website for that is compassionatecities.org. And then just very briefly, feel free to follow the Charter for Compassion on Facebook and Twitter. And then the big opportunity here that we're here to discuss, of course, that Roselle and Guo-Chin will discuss, are reading groups. So I'd like to introduce Roselle, who coordinated and organized and managed the reading groups for 12 Steps to a Compassionate Life for the Charter for Compassion team. And I just have to say that she is an artist at Global Online Facilitation, and we were very lucky to have her, and I look forward to hearing her speak on this event. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pam. It's so great to be here with all of you all across the country, and I saw Puerto Rico was on board as well. So just to start, the 12 Steps to a Compassionate Life is deliberately based on AA's 12 Steps. It was Karen's intent to give us, as she calls it, a place to begin to deal with our addiction to egotism. And the reading groups were actually Pam's idea. They were started in January of 2011, and to date there have been more than 800 downloads of the guide, and there are groups in 11 countries that we know of, because we don't require people to, we don't track the groups specifically. We can track the downloads. And we also have a discussion on Facebook where there's been a lot of give and take about what works in the reading groups. So the groups are pretty diverse. We have book groups. We have, of course, a lot of churches. We have meditation groups. We have a meetup group in Dubai. The Wisconsin Parent Education Initiative used the material for a workshop. There are prison groups that are going to be formed in the United Kingdom. Dartmouth College used it for community service fellows training before they go overseas. And as far as we know, we have one library, so we're really looking forward to add more. St. John's County Library on Anastasia Island in St. Augustine, Florida had joined us. So as Pam said, this is a great opportunity for libraries to be a change agent for compassion in your community. And the book and format, as you can see, can be used in a variety of settings, and though a number of religious groups are involved, as Pam mentioned, so too are many secular groups. What's so great about the reading groups is, just get this slide up, in addition to being a good fit with libraries, is that they give participants the opportunity to learn more about compassion from a variety of perspectives, to practice compassion in a safe place, to share our struggles and successes. As you probably know, compassion isn't always easy to practice. In fact, it can be pretty challenging sometimes. So sharing successes and struggles can be really helpful. It also allows us to stretch ourselves. Sometimes we need others to push us, like exercising with a friend. So being in a reading group pushes us to work the steps, not only to be accountable, but sometimes to venture out of our comfort zone. And finally, there's really something about being part of a larger movement that's enticing and gives us momentum. So just in a nutshell, some keys to success, and these were partly from the experience with the Fetzer Institute's campaign for love and forgiveness, and partly from the feedback we've gotten from the reading groups so far. First is to create a safe space. These groups may differ somewhat from regular reading groups, as people may share sensitive information about themselves. So we have guidelines on page 5 to share with your group. Second is to practice compassion within the group, and this may be a no-brainer, but for instance, listening is often a challenge in a group, much less a challenge just in our daily life. So we've included the importance of listening on page 6, and in fact, one group told us that they spent an entire session discussing just the importance of listening. Meet on a consistent basis. Initially, we suggested one time a month, and we were going to meet throughout the year. For some groups, that's not going to work. So you could certainly meet weekly. You can meet 2 times a month, once a month, whatever works. There should be a little bit of time in between for people to actually practice the actions, because action is really key to the Charter for Compassion and what Karen wants folks to do. And then customizing the format. If you've looked at the guide, it's really flexible, and the idea behind that was to do what works for you, for your venue, for your audience, for your facilitator. So I'll talk a little bit more about the format later, giving some specific examples. So about the guide, forgive me if some of you have already gone over it with a fine-tooth comb, but I just wanted to go over a few things. It's basically a customizable template. It was developed for all comers, for interested individuals, for organizations or formal institutions like libraries, religious groups. So some of the information might be a little basic. Feel free to use what makes sense for you. We do have guidelines for setting up and facilitating a group. I do want to say here that you don't have to have a professional facilitator for this. If you're a good listener, you have sensitivity, you can keep things moving, I think that that's great. And so anyone who's really interested in doing this can jump in. The guidelines for setting up and facilitating the group were again based on Fetzer's Campaign for Love and Forgiveness, which I might mention, we did 4 conversations on love, 4 conversations on forgiveness, and they did have a measurable impact on people's willingness to forgive. We found that 70% of participants were more likely to forgive in various situations as a result of participating. So it's really powerful. The discussion questions in the guide are drawn, as you may have seen, for the most part, directly from Karen Armstrong's book. And I did note what pages they were from so you could go back and get any more information, because oftentimes she had a lot of detail prior to asking the question. I will say that step 5 on mindfulness, that section, if you've read the book, it's very short, and because mindfulness and meditation are experiential, that might be a step where you'd want to have somebody come in and talk about mindfulness or lead a meditation. And so there is information and websites related to that step that you could get more information on that. Actions, those are key to the charter, and Karen Armstrong is passionate about this, hence her remarks on page 7, really underscoring the importance of acting on compassion in bite-sized pieces, something that's realistic, etc. So there's lots of suggestions in her book, and we've also included actions for each of the steps in the guide. And finally, we did get feedback as we launched the reading group campaign that folks wanted some books for children. And so Eileen Cooper at Booklist Magazine compiled the list that we now have on page 15, and it's for children K through 5, so that might be useful to you. So going to specific examples of how facilitators have really customized the groups, and these are in the guide as well. First of all, in Lincoln, Nebraska, something they did, I'm not sure you'll have time to do this, but I think it's really quite interesting. They have 2 meetings on each step. The first one is just a discussion of the step overall, and the second one they return and talk about having practiced that particular step or that action, how it worked in the real world and what the challenges were. In Dubai, one of the things that the facilitator did on step 3, compassion for yourself, is to go to Kristen Neff's website. Kristen Neff is a researcher and in the forefront of self-compassion research. And there is a self-assessment test there, which the facilitator asked participants to take, and then use resources on that site to increase their self-compassion. In Alexandria, Virginia, and Palmyra, Pennsylvania, they're using Google Groups to add resources, collateral resources, books, poetry, video, links that participants in the group can refer to between meetings. And that's something you could use. You could include books related to the topic that you have available at the library. In Wellington, New Zealand, they actually hand out the charter to participants, and in Lincoln, Nebraska, they read the charter at the beginning of each meeting. And then, of course, here in Seattle, one more thing before I introduce Reverend Sheen, is that there are also videos available on the Charter for Compassion website, that if you wanted to complement the material with the videos, those are available on the Charter website. And there's also a video of Krista Tippett speaking at the first anniversary of the Charter for Compassion on compassion, and it's a very compelling brief talk that's available on TED.com too. So Reverend Guochi facilitated a monthly Circle of Compassion group at a local bookstore here, and she is using Karen Armstrong's 12 Steps as the group's focus this year. She's a wonderful facilitator and uses a great format that we thought you all might want to hear about, and she'll share. This group has a spiritual focus, though that is certainly not necessary. As we mentioned, there are plenty of groups that are secular. So I'm going to hand it over to Jean to talk about her experience here in Seattle.
Thank you, Roselle. In a corner space surrounded by books, street lights filter through the window and shine on the small circle in green chairs. So I'm the Buddhist nun who often begins the circle with grounding exercises for those who have just come in from a long, frazzled day at work or an unpleasant exchange with a dear one. It's as simple as asking everyone to just drop everything on their minds for the moment and simply take a couple deep breaths. Inhale and exhale. Or listen to the ringing of the wind chime, the music in the background, or inner guidance. It's important that the facilitator listens deeply and guides so that everyone does the same. And some of the best listeners I know are librarians. Now, the Seattle Reading Group consists of secular and non-secular participants, though I'm a woman of faith and tend to draw those interested in contemplative practices and women's circles. I'm simply interested in restoring compassion to the center of every heart and tradition. The core composition of this reading group also consists of engaged activists from the Compassionate Action Network that launched Seattle as the first official compassionate city that affirmed the Charter for Compassion. So standing on the shoulders of giants and tapping into existing resources really has sustained the reading group and allows for more facile connection and collaboration. Being mindful of compassion in thinking and talking about compassion, a circle naturally creates a safe and joyous space for people to learn about the 12 to compassionate life and themselves, each other. So we have a brief self-introduction also at the beginning that asks each person to share one sentence about what's on your mind now. I'll come back to the review of committed actions later. Now, to encourage more in-depth discussion and bring out the best in introverts and extroverts, I use a praxis circle approach. So 2 questions are posed, and you get a couple of minutes to respond on your own in writing. Then you find a partner and discuss your thoughts. Then the entire group goes around sharing observations and insights. So altogether, these 3 steps can take up to 30 to 60 minutes, depending on group dynamics and the power of the questions. You may customize the timing and steps as you see fit. After collecting everyone's wisdom, and we truly honor that everyone has something to contribute to the circle, whether they've read the book or not, speak more or less. After learning from everyone's wisdom, we move into action, the action component of the reading group. So you may make a commitment on something you will try until we meet again. This can be self-compassion, compassion related to family, friends, strangers, or communities, large or small. Young women from universities have decided to begin conversations with those in the Tea Party, for example. A mother has made attempts to change her estranged relationship with her daughter, and vice versa. Dinners have been offered to the homeless. So people often make similar commitments for each step too.
because the circle serves as a supportive witness when we review the actions, which is an earlier step in the format. When we review the actions committed, most participants have indeed tried them out and will share their unique experiences. The outcome of these implementations range from more peace in hectic lives, better communication with loved ones, heightened concern and involvement regarding a perceived hostile other, a troubled spot in the world, or a complex political issue. So, in conclusion, at the end of the reading group and my presentation here, is that we usually wrap some form of gratitude around everyone as they leave. So I offer the same here. Thank you, and may you whiten the circles of compassion. And I believe Mary is going to speak now.
Hello, can everyone hear me? Sheen, I think you may need to give up your microphone. Thank you. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Reverend Sheen. I'm sure everyone has been processing a lot of what we've talked about in the last 40 minutes or so, and thinking about how to adapt these, what are basically program resources, to your libraries and your community needs as you've been listening. And I know there are questions that are starting to pop up. Before we'll have about 15 minutes or 10 or 15 minutes for questions, but before I open things up for question and answer, I just want to touch on a few details. Again, the upcoming grant application deadline is November 18th to submit a proposal for Building Common Ground, Discussions of Community, Civility, and Compassion. The application guidelines, the online application, and a wealth of support resources can all be found at the URL that you see on the screen right now. If you have any questions, feel free to email or call the ALA Public Programs Office. We are here to help you, to be a sounding board for your ideas, and to answer any questions you may have about this initiative or the proposal. Questions that occur to you beyond today's webinar. It is an online application again, so I encourage you, if possible, to submit before the November 18th deadline. Also, I want to say that in case you missed it, last week's webinar exploring the community tours program model is available as a recorded webinar on via the same page that you registered for this webinar. Feel free to check that out. And an archived version of this presentation and a copy of the PowerPoint will be included in that area tomorrow as well. Tomorrow, you will, and I'm told actually 12 hours from now, so I guess at midnight, maybe we can change that, you'll receive an email with a link to access this content and inviting you to take a brief survey about today's session. When you get that email, please look for it. Please take a few minutes to share your feedback on today's session with us. We really need that feedback in order to improve our services and to continue receiving funding to offer opportunities like Building Common Ground and these types of online learning opportunities and information opportunities for the field. So I think we have exactly 45 minutes left in our allotted time. I'm looking and I see one question immediately from Barbara Wolf. asking if there is any recommended maximum size for a group, for a reading group. And I'm going to ask Roselle to field that question.
Yeah, I think probably around 20. I know with our forgiveness groups, 20. They topped out at 25, and I think if you get, I mean, that's actually fairly large. So I would say our group here in Seattle, I think we've had like 8 people, and that's a really nice size group. So 20, I think, would be the maximum that you'd want. A smaller group probably allows you more discussion and interaction. At the same time, one of the great things about the format that Sheen has is if you have a little bit bigger group, everybody does get to participate by breaking up into twos.
And I want to add to that to say, those of you, I think I see a number of people in this webinar who participated in the Let's Talk About It, Love and Forgiveness project, and those folks would also say that from our perspective in terms of reviewing these proposals, we are not looking at this as a numbers game in terms of attendance. What we are looking for in your proposals is clearly articulated goals. So, and clearly articulated plan that satisfies the requirements for the grant. So if the audience or participants and issues you are targeting mean that you want to restrict attendance to 8 participants, that is fine. Please make that case. If you want to make this a community-wide initiative, then again, by the same token, include your plan to serve large numbers, be it through multiple sessions with multiple facilitators. Just explain your plan. We really do know that you know your community's needs best. So we just need to, and your peers who will be reviewing these proposals, need to see that and hear that from you in your proposal. That is all. Okay, so I'm not seeing any other questions in the Q&A area there, which means that either no one has any questions, which is certainly possible, or this is an opportunity for me to ask my questions. So I'm going to pause for a second while I give folks a chance to chime in. Okay, then I'm going to ask a question. Oh, Barbara Wolf, you're excellent. You have a question. I'll hold mine for a minute. Right. So Barbara is asking if a story. I'm assuming Roselle or any of our presenters could share a story involving elementary school children. And I'm assuming either as a result of the reading list that's been developed or with the Charter for Compassion. So again, I'm not sure who can answer this, but I will
This is Roselle, and I'm actually going to see if Pam has any thoughts on that. We have not involved elementary school children. We did provide that book list so that parents who were involved in reading groups, would have that for kids or educators or, for you all librarians. But I'm not aware of any reading groups related to that. There may be some activity with the charter, so I'm going to turn it over to Pam.
Thanks, Roselle. So the book is a pretty mature book. So I would say that high schoolers and on up for adults are probably the right audience for the book. But I also want to second what Roselle said, which is the Golden Rule book by the children's editor of Booklist is an excellent book for kids. And there have been some requests to create a 12 Steps to a Compassionate Life for children, but we don't currently have a decision on that yet. So it is a more mature audience for 12 Steps to a Compassionate Life.
I wonder if Reverend Sheen or Roselle, if you could talk a bit about, based on your familiarity with the reading groups that have been happening around the country and around the world, whether there are particular audiences that or participants that are drawn to these groups. If you have any insight to offer the librarians on the webinar about planning for types of participants or targeting audiences. And then as a side note, I want to say to the librarians in attendance, Roselle mentioned this, but so far we know of one library who's done this. So those of you who want to take this on, you truly would be creating some new ground in terms of programming with this type of model. So from our perspective, that's very exciting. And we're very much viewing this as, you know, in some ways a pilot effort. So my question again was if you can provide any insight into typical audiences or demographics or people who would be drawn to 12 Steps for Compassionate Life Reading Group.
Oops, having microphone problems here. Sheen, did you want to take that, or?
Well, I think Roselle could better answer the demographics and those aspects for the country and beyond. For myself, I could say a little bit more about the Seattle Reading Group and its composition. I think that as librarians, you have access to existing resources in the community. Each community is unique, and because we really are standing on the shoulders of giants, really building on existing resources, that's exactly what the Seattle Reading Group has done. So for myself, I have a tendency to draw women and a tendency to draw those who are interested in mindfulness. And because Seattle is the center of Compassionate Action Network, we tend to draw a lot of compassionistas. The core of this particular reading group consists of those individuals, including Pam and Roselle. So I think that librarians really, because you come in contact with so many different organizations and people in the community, that you know what already are some of those people who are interested in compassion. And I would really build on those and build on the composition of that.
That's great, Sheen. I was going to say that, you know, a lot of the folks who've just come to the reading groups on their own are from churches, book groups, you know, meditation groups. But I think the challenge is, as Sheen said, to really build on that and not just get the, you know, the usual suspects. So, you know, people, obviously community service professionals, healthcare providers, you know, it's going to appeal to, you know, a certain demographic, but I encourage you to really sort of stretch that and open it up to others as well, i.e. There's groups starting, you know, prison groups. I mean, I'm not suggesting you do prison groups, but I'm just saying let's push the envelope a little bit more and try to bring in others who might not normally be pulled to this kind of thing.
Okay, we have another question from Patricia Ventura. It's asking if this grant is only focused on book groups and can it be for other events. And Patricia, I'd advise you to review the project guidelines. It's actually a multi-format grant opportunity, funding opportunity. The project website, the resource website, has a variety of different programming resources you can work with, and you also have an opportunity to suggest your own. But there is video content, there is a community, external community tour program model. There are many recommendations. There's other facilitation opportunities on civic engagement and civic reflection. So it's really a wide variety, a programming array that we're hoping you can utilize to address issues you identify in your community under this sort of umbrella of community, civility, and compassion. And I should also mention at this point that the videos, the Krista Tippett video and a number of other videos related to these themes, the Krista Tippett one is one that Roselle mentioned, are also available for download and embedding for your programs via the project website. And a number of the organizations and initiatives that have been mentioned today, the Compassionate Cities Initiative, among them are also on that project website as a resource for you to be able to check out. So I hope that clears that up. We have another question from Sue Bratton, who's asking what characteristics would a group leader need, and would a team of 2 or 3 leaders, and I assume by that you mean discussion group facilitators, be workable? And Sue, I'm wondering if you're talking about a few leaders during every session, or having a series that switches leaders throughout. That's another library program model. And I'd leave that to Roselle or Reverend Sheen to answer.
As far as the qualities of a facilitator, they need to be a good listener, have sensitivity, be able to keep things moving, summarize, but move the group along. So those are the things that I would think of. And as far as 2 or 3 leaders, I think if you switch off, that's one thing. I think 2 or 3 in the group, 3 would probably be too much, especially depending upon how many people you have in the group. 2, I think, would be workable. It just depends on how many you have and what the format is. I don't know, Sheen, do you have something to add?
Yes, if it's throughout the series, having 2 or more facilitators is actually very helpful, because there are times when a facilitator cannot be in attendance. So actually, Roselle has been a primary facilitator for steps when I was absent, for example. And it's very nice that she's part of the core and that she's there consistently, and the switch off is smooth. The transition is smooth. As far as for each step and within each session, having 2 or 3 leaders, not necessarily facilitators, but I would certainly try to offer opportunities for each person to be a leader. So, for example, someone may begin the circle, the reading group, as we have done. One person leads a certain type of exercise, another person leads another, and at the conclusion of it, there's yet another opportunity. And certainly throughout, when there are special presentations that may be useful. For example, Pam has come and spoken about the 4 steps with the UN Millennium Goals and the Charter for Compassion. Others have talked about various projects that they are involved with. So giving leadership opportunities within the circle itself, within the reading group itself, is certainly part and parcel of compassion, and also specifically bringing compassion into action.
Okay, I think it's just about time to wind up. And Pam Kilburn-Miller has asked, she wanted to make a concluding comment before I make my concluding comment, so here she is.
Thanks, Mary. I just wanted to say one quick thing, which is that when I first started on this project, I knew that compassion was important. I mean, that's an obvious common sense thing, but it wasn't until I went to Stanford University and heard the neurologist, who's the director of their Center for Compassion and Altruism Research and Education, that's part of the medical school, for his concluding comments at an event with the Dalai Lama and Karen Armstrong. He choked up on stage and said that he felt that compassion is what is needed to bring our planet back from the brink. And that he expanded this to include the environment, to include basically all cross-cutting concepts. And so that really woke me up to the significance of this, and that they were putting their credibility on the line for really raising this issue and the importance of awakening the golden rule around the world. So I just wanted to mention that and thank everybody again for participating on this classroom.
Thank you so much, Pam. I wanted to just highlight one thing that turned up in the chat comments from Barbara Wolf, who said the civic reflection facilitation training is excellent and will be available at ALA. And she's referring to facilitation training by the Project on Civic Reflection, which is we have also put under the umbrella of resources for this initiative. There are a number of training sessions. There'll be a pre-conference at PLA. There'll be a pre-conference at ALA annual conference. I'm referring to the PLA biannual conference in Philadelphia this spring. And there are also some independent ones in Chicago just run by the Project on Civic Reflection. Information about those is also on the project website, and travel and fees for those are allowable expenses under the grant. So if that is another sort of avenue you'd like to take with your proposal, then be sure to check those out. And I'm glad to see someone's here. So I want to just thank everyone again. Thank Pamela Kilburn-Miller, Roselle Kovitz, and Reverend Guo Chin, the Fetzer Institute, and all of you for taking the time out of your day to join us. I really hope I see proposals from many, many, many of you, or most of you, or all of you, on November 18th. And thank you again for being here. And don't forget to fill out the survey, please.